So, hello the four of you, hello viewers. André, this is your turn. So André is your keynote speaker for viewers. So André, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. If somebody could start the presentation. Or not.
It's going to be now live. Now it's there.
There we are. Okay. There's two of these. Well, I think I mentioned my name. If you've forgotten, it's André Simha. I am a musician, I'm a shoe lover, and I'm a geek at heart. And I've been involved in technology since the very early days of home computing. That sort of tells you my age. Back then, my job was, involved trying to convince shops to dedicate a section of the retail space to home computing. And so, some of them saw that as a step forward, and they listened and they survived, and some of them didn't, and they missed out. And 40 years later, here we are. In many ways, I try to be a digital advocate, talking with people and helping them to see the potential of technology to change the way we work and the way we interact with each other. And that's always been a core of my professional career. Next slide, please. A few numbers on MSc. I think that I'm not going to comment each of the numbers. There's nothing worse than reading your slides. But I think that the number that I think is important is the fact that we call over 500 ports all around the world. And I think that that's really somewhere where we need to focus, particularly on this panel, and to see how we can improve everybody's life in this industry. Next slide, please. So, what's happening with my cargo? When we speak to our customers from different sectors, we see a growing demand for digital solutions. They want, better visibility, better tracking, monitoring of containers. They want to know what's happening. They want to know how exceptions are being dealt with, and I think that's more and more important. And for sure, technology can help the management and make the supply chain smarter. We have a couple of examples. Many shipping lines provide customers with an online platform, such as msc.com or mymsc.com, where you can get up-to-date information about the whereabouts of your container, of your cargo. You just enter your bill of lading or your container number, and you get some information on the website. Things get complicated when shippers use multiple carriers, or even when they're using multiple carriers within an alliance. They will go and search on the different websites, and they may get different information. There's a lot of reasons why the information could be different. It's not only the quality of the data that we're feeding. Some carriers, for example, they don't specify the exact location of an event. Instead, they just provide a geographical location, such as Detroit, and other might play even differently. So I think that these are, we talk to customers a lot. We try to understand what are the needs, what really makes sense to their supply chain, and of course, we try to bring solutions to that. Next slide, please. And Eric probably remembers this one, but I've used this example before, but I think it still works. And I always think to myself, being a musician, what would happen if I gave each of you a different instrument and I said, okay, let's play. It would probably sound pretty bad and disorganized because everybody would be doing their own thing. So, welcome to the magical world of digital in the shipping industry. And to a certain extent, that is where we are, or where we were, let's say, before we decided to collaborate and try to improve things. Next slide, please. So from a digital standpoint, and here you have some pasta, which is at the heart of our company. The situation created thousands of different systems which were operating with different hardware, different software, different languages, different terms, different regulatory requirements. Or back to the music analogy, and then I'll stop. If each player has a different instrument, a different sheet of music written in a different format, then there's no way we play together, even if we're seasoned musicians. Next slide, please. So essentially the challenge is enormous. I thought about putting some graphs, but I don't think the graphs are very speak-ready. In 1980, we were 4.5 billion humans, and we shipped 3 billion tons of goods around the world. 40 years later, we doubled our population to 8 billion and multiplied by 4 times the cargo to 11 billion tons. And that's overall. By 2030, so in 10 years, we're going to have to find a way to ship another 5 billion tons around the world. But we don't have 40 years to get there, and the revolution of bigger ships and the container has already happened. So what do? Next slide. So here we are. So when I first mentioned the carrier collaboration project internally, it didn't have a name yet. The idea of collaborating with other big industry players to create a standards association, I remember some people telling me, this is never going to work. Well, actually it did. And one of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein is, if at first an idea is not absurd, then there is no hope for it. So you mustn't be afraid to think outside the box. You may not know how to do it, but if you surround yourself with the right people, I think, nothing is impossible. The proof is that in April 2019, the DCSA was born. DCSA stands for Digital Container Shipping Association. Initially difficult to pronounce, but you get used to it. It's like interoperability. And the mission of DCSA was to provide frameworks, common languages, and standards to transform a lot of our inefficient practices. And the ultimate goals of the association includes, simplification, efficiency for all, interoperability at various levels for the benefits of all the actors in the industry. And of course, I'm very happy to be on the panel with Thomas, our CEO, and I'm sure he's going to be super happy to answer any questions you have after my quick keynote. So next slide, please. And there we go. And I after a few weeks of the foundation of DCSA, we had incredible feedback, not only, press releases, of course, but we had very positive feedback and personal feedback from customers and vendors. And I think DCSA really felt that there was a need to bring us all together and to try to agree on the rules of the game. And the industry realized that the initiative behind the DCSA was the only way to get everybody together to become more efficient and improve interoperability. And when you look at the way supply chains move today, I think this is a very, very key element which we haven't had until now. And next slide, please. I'm not going to read all the fantastic achievements that DCSA has made in the past year and a half. And I mean, particularly considering the Corona situation, you have a slide here, which I'm sure will be distributed, and DCSA.org has all the information about the various standards, whether it's the blueprint, the track and trace APIs, IoT connectivity, which is a very important topic, vessel schedules, load lists and day plans, just-in-time port calls, of course, which is a key element of discussion today with the ports, and of course, e-bill of lading, which is coming soon, and some of the other documentation, digitization projects that we will be launching. So my first call to everyone is go to dcsa.org. Everything is free. You don't have to pay. You can look at all the standards, and I think you'll find that interesting. Next slide, and there's only 2 or 3 left, so I won't keep you too busy. Here's a smart port for you. Is it Antwerp? It could be Antwerp. I apologize, it's not Barcelona. But if you look at this image, I think that when you think about standards, when you think about just-in-time, for example, that I'm sure we'll discuss further, I think that you understand the complexity of managing a port, of being as efficient as possible, both, of course, for the carrier, to avoid, ships being stuck outside, but also for the customers to be able to get their cargo as fast as possible. And if we go to the next slide, looking at the just-in-time port call standard, And here again, a few pictures to illustrate this. The idea is to allow to exchange event data in a uniform way between the carriers, the ports, and the terminals. It allows container ships to optimize the steaming speed, which reduces fuel consumptions and CO2 emissions, of course. So we're in a very high sustainability effort these days. And I think it's really pretty simple to understand. Rather than having emails flowing from ship to shore or agents or carriers providing information, we want to find a way to exchange that data in a structured way that can be used intelligently by the ports as well to be prepared for the vessel calls. And my penultimate slide, yes, thank you very much. You may be thinking, okay, this is great, but what do I have to do? What's in it for me? Do you want my opinion? And the answer is yes, DCSA wants everybody's opinion. And probably Thomas is thinking, oh no, we're going to get more requests. But the reality is that it's only working with all the different actors, understanding the needs, that DCSA can focus as to which projects make the most sense and are the most relevant. So second call to action, similar to the first one, visit dcsa.org and get involved. My last slide, why are we doing this? This is my personal opinion, is we do this because we believe in solving the problem together, and that we'll be able to move into the future, become more efficient, and eventually play better music together. So thank you very much for listening to me, and now I leave the panel back to Jordi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, André. This is really, thank you for your insights, and this is really food for thought for the session today and onwards. I remember the first time I spoke to Thomas, maybe 1 year ago, 2 years ago, that we shippers were fearing DCSA. And now we are just cooperating into having some similar milestones and objectives, which is what you are exactly saying, yeah? So this is nice. Thank you very much. So, let me tell you, just for the viewers and also for the panelists, some housekeeping of the session. It's important not to make for the panelists long monologues, so that it's important that we have some kind of debate and not only silo views. That's important. And for the viewers, there will be time for questions at the end of the session, so stay tuned. Any question you have, please let us know. We'll keep it there, and then we'll send it to the panelists or to myself, whomever you want. So let's start with the first question today. Thomas, we've talked a lot about different things on shippers and carriers during the session, but how does the mission of work and work of DCSA match up to address some of the industry challenges? And also, whom will be the standards you publish benefit?
That's a big question, Jordi, but thank you very much. I think first and foremost, most of the industry participants, they will agree that our industry still holds significant potential for doing things more efficiently, more effectively. And that's of course also what André and his fellow carrier members, they saw when they founded us in April of 2019. What I typically do is I compare container shipping with all its complexities to other industries that are more digital. It could be telco, it could be banking, it could be retail. And when you compare to where we are in those industries, there's a significant potential for digitalization. One example that I use is mobile phone. You in the early 2000s, when you had to travel to the US, Eric will appreciate this. You had to switch your phone to log on to either the US or the Japanese network. But that's solved now, and our phones are thankfully interoperable, and it does not matter whether Eric right now sits in New Delhi, he can still download his emails. It might be expensive, but it works. And our desire for digitally advanced industry is hopefully very well aligned with most shippers, freight forwarders, ports, terminal operators, and intermodal providers. And to be honest, I also think that's what our portfolio expresses.
Okay, good. Good for the first question. It was bigger than your reply, so I spoke more than you. Thank you. Javier, now it's your turn. What are shippers' biggest pain points, and how can standards alleviate those problem areas? Also, shippers have changed over the time. When do we consider common semantics in a way forward? How do we match these two items? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the pain for us is the transparency and visibility, because nowadays we are not having enough transparency and visibility, so we don't know where is exactly our cargo and when we can start loading in the terminal or cargoes for our customers and so on. So this is something that is a pain for us, because we don't know when exactly is our cargo, how we are going to play with that. And also our stocks is also, we are having some variability of them due to these reasons, because if we could have this information, it would be easy for us to manage. And also we have to have some transparency also in the same language, because depending on the carrier, you are having a different concepts that are not always the same for depending on the carrier that you are working with him. And also another point is probably that there are some payments that we don't know exactly, because it will depend on the carrier that will be changed in one point, in another point. So it's something that we need, well, we would like to have and understand. Why the standard is important? Because we will have a common language. So when we are talking with the carrier, we are going to know what's going on, and in a structured way, we are going to have how are going to be the things and so on. So I think it's really helpful to have this standard, because at the end will help us as a shipper to understand better the constraints and also all the movement and all the language from the carrier they are having, and to have clear boundaries between us and the carriers.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's true. I'm also on your side, yeah, on your approach. André, just one quick question. Are carriers fully committed to DCSA standards and publications and all this? Because we have a problem at the associations that maybe members, sometimes they are not fully committed to whatever we say at the beginning. So.
The carriers are fully committed to DCSA. But, I think creating standards is a great thing. However, it's all about taking the necessary action to achieve the adoption. And I think that's the key. What I mean is that, we're more than just vessel captains, maintenance crews, and ships. We see ourselves as a service provider to the end customer. And I think we have an opportunity here that I will personally pursue relentlessly to make sure that, again, as my role as chairman of DCSA, I really want to make sure that everybody's on board and that they believe in what we're doing. That was a short answer.
No, fantastic. Great. Eric, now is your turn. I mean, you as an outsider who are viewing shippers, carriers, and everyone. I mean, what environment conditions do you think must exist to make it possible? Because as an industry expert, what do you think is needed to make new standards-based success?
Yeah, that's kind of a critical question, I think, especially when it comes to something like standards. I think it's great that you and Javier are involved in this discussion and that the ESC has been involved directly with the DCSA, because honestly, I think it really comes down to shippers, first and foremost. Shippers are ultimately the customers of container lines, of logistics service providers, even terminals and ports in a more indirect way. The cargo owners are the customers. So if they're not demanding that everybody adhere to common standards, it's going to be way too easy for individual parties to stray from these initiatives and kind of do their own thing. And I want to be clear, in my role, I get to talk to a lot of different software providers in the logistics space and in the ports and maritime space. And they've all sort of, in general, made it very simple for me. If there are standards, everything becomes easier for them. But if there aren't standards, they move on. It's not as if they stop building things. So they just figure out workarounds around the lack of standards and build products that sort of bypass the problem. So really, I think what we're talking about is an acceleration of adoption, and we're talking about, as André mentioned, making it easier for a cargo owner or any other entity to do business with a single party, whether it's a carrier, a terminal, an LSP, a software provider that's building a product. And shippers have to be the driving force behind that.
Yeah, thank you. That's important. And now, well, just the debate for all of you. I mean, based on what Eric was mentioning, I mean, is there a risk to consider these standards only as an exposure value or danger? I mean, do every party consider that this might be a danger to have some more exposure? What's your opinion on this? All of you, one by one, yeah? Thomas.
Maybe I'll go first then. I do think that there could potentially be companies and business models out there that feel threatened by the introduction of standards. I would think that's not quite dissimilar from what has happened in other industries. We've seen that, especially in the technology industry, where there's been disintermediation happening, and someone could also fear that would be the case in our industry. We've certainly heard it articulated from the freight forwarders, but I should say that thankfully our dialogue with the freight forwarders is very good, both at the global level with IATA, in Europe with CLECA. So I don't see a real threat. I do think though that everybody will have to continue to evolve their business models and try and come up with new solutions, and that goes for freight forwarders as well as it does for carriers and ports and the likes. Because if we want to harvest the inefficiencies that are in the system, it does require that we all move.
Okay, Javier, do you think that shippers consider this a danger? Sorry, Eric, please go on.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in and say if your business model was based on exploiting an inefficiency in the market that wasn't creating value, you may need to rethink whether that's going to have a long-term, kind of sustainability. And really, what is happening here is the inefficiencies, whether by standard or otherwise, are being wrung out of the system. So if you have a model that's in danger based on something that, based on a lack of alignment between different entities, I'm not sure there's much of a future, beyond the near future for you anyway.
Yeah, Javier, do you think that we shippers, I consider myself a shipper as well, although I'm a Secretary General, but do you think that we shippers also consider this a danger of exposure, or that's something that's going to become a relief in terms of language?
I think that will be a relief. So, as you said at the beginning of this panel, is something that we told that is the collaboration, and we need to be on this side. The collaboration it will be is not be a problem on that. So we are sharing and be transparent on that. We will have the collaboration of the rest of the supply chain to, if you have any dangers or any problem, that your customer and also your suppliers can help in that. So I don't see any risk of that. I think that will be a benefit, because then you can ask for the support of the rest of the supply chain. So at the end, it's a whole supply chain will be affected. Also, if you have something that is not in risk or whatever.
Okay, good. Then let's go down to operations. I mean, we are talking about standards, very abstract. But when we go down into operations, what do DCSA standards mean for the operational world? What do we expect as shippers, or how do you see it, Eric, from your side and perspective? How can this be translated into the real operational world? Any of you? Eric, Thomas, Javier, André?
Yeah, thank you, Jordi. Maybe I'll go first, considering it is us that are developing some of these standards. I like the fact that you asked for examples, so I'll give you a few. Most shippers, they deal with many different shipping lines, or certainly the larger ones does. And today they want to have track and trace, like discussed, visibility is a big issue. That's also what our surveys have shown, then today they need individual EDI connections to be informed about where is the container, what has happened, has it been loaded, has it been discharged, has it been gated out. So there's today as many connections as the number of carriers that you work with. And each of these are created bespoke, which creates a massive complexity in the infrastructure of André. DCSA has made a open source track and trace API that can track your container across the 9 different ocean liners that are our members, and that the definition of that API is out there free of charge at Swagger Hub, where it can be downloaded and it can be implemented in dialogue with the respective container carriers. So it will mean a significant simplification of the IT estates that we see out there. Another example is in the IoT space. The IoT space, we have vessel sharing agreements, and when a reefer container from, let's say, MSC ship is loaded on board a Maersk vessel that travels from Asia to Europe, and the MSC customer has paid to see the temperature of the cargo or the shock of the CO2 or O2 levels, then because there's no interoperability, it means that the MSC container cannot speak to the Maersk ship and vice versa. And this goes across all of them. If the container is loaded on board a feeder vessel, it cannot speak to the feeder vessel because there are no standard for gateways until we have published them earlier this year. So that's just 2. I'll leave the floor to some of the others, but I can mention more if you're interested.
Yeah, there are many more, I guess. Javier, any expectation on what can this mean into the operational world for shippers?
I think that if we have a standard, we will have the possibility to improve. Because until you don't have any standard, you are not going to improve, because you have different ways of working. As a shipper, what we are seeing, we are used to work with a lot of standards. So, and this is our way to improve. Once you have the standard, you can improve this standard, and then I think that will be a benefit for all of us having this standard, because at least we will have one way that is clear and is which one we have to improve. So, and I think will be help also from the carriers and also from the shippers to improve also their own standards and way of working.
Good. Eric, I think that you also, from your privileged view, being outside our mess, let me call it that way, you also have some questions for us. So please, go on with some of your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. In my normal day job, I get to ask questions rather than answer them a lot. So, I'm certainly curious as to what each of, we've talked about kind of a ideal scenario. What do you think individually, André from a carrier perspective, Javier from a shipper perspective, Jordi, and Thomas from a kind of cross-organizational perspective, how do we measure whether we're successful at various points on this, right? The DCSA has developed a lot of standards already. You've engaged with shippers, but how do you sort of look back and say, okay, we've reached this level of progress, or we haven't reached this level of progress? Maybe we can all talk about kind of how we view success on some of these different initiatives that have been started. André, maybe you want to start from a carrier perspective?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think just back to what you were saying before, I think there's one thing we didn't mention, is the fact that these standards are also going to bring us an improvement in the quality of the data that we get. Because, we can talk about APIs and more, there'll be some new, high-tech thing that goes to the moon and back. But if we don't have quality information, then the means of transmitting that information doesn't really help. So I think for me, the standards, one thing that it needs to bring is an improvement in quality. So to answer this question, I think we will certainly be measuring the impact of some of these standards in the quality of the data that we're exchanging with the different parties. In the case of data exchanges, of course, in IoT and things like that, we'll be measuring it simply in the fact that it works or it doesn't work, and it brings efficiency and the information to the customer that they require.
Yeah. Javier, you must juggle multiple carriers. Would you consider a sort of metric for success that you can manage multiple carriers in a more kind of common way, as opposed to having a separate set of processes for each carrier?
I think so. So I think that will help us a lot. Also, as we say, if we are going to get a more quality of information, also will help us. Because at the end, what we are asking a lot of times is for information. Where is your cargo? When it's going to arrive? So if we can get all of this information in a way, it will help us a lot to understand better this situation. And if we have to do a contingency plan or whatever, at least we will have a clear information on that. So I think it will help, and we will get with this clear information with the proof of the quality.
Good. Yes, I think. Go on, Eric, please.
No, please, Jordi, go ahead.
Thank you. No, one of the points here is that standards and transparency, is this only a nice word, or there should be a commitment from both parties? I mean, now we are discussing about shippers and carriers. Is there a commitment framework where we should all commit in terms of not only respect, but in terms of agreements? What do you think? Commitment in any items. I have many ideas, but you you are the ones. I don't know. As a quick reply, Eric. Let's start the other way around. Eric, what do you think commitment should be? A quick one, this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the shipping industry as a whole has kind of struggled with that idea of both sides holding up the commitments that they make. So it would be great if the industry could kind of commit to being to aligning on standards and actually commit to using standards. The one danger I sort of think about a lot is, everybody has figured out a way to do things without standards for so long, and that sort of way of working gets passed along generation by generation. And every single day that there are not standards, boxes keep moving, ports keep, loading and unloading containers. It's sort of a momentum to it that continues. And so you almost have to step outside and say, we are going to, as an industry, change that. And not just leave it to someone else to do it, but actually forcefully change and realize a big, kind of difference. So yeah, I definitely think whether it happens or not, I'm not necessarily betting any money on it, but I'm hopeful.
Okay, good, Javier. Any commitments from us, the shipper side?
I think that we were asking, we were talking about the quality of the information. I think that we also need to be on this side. So we need to provide to our carriers transparency and also a clear quality of information. So it doesn't make sense to overbooking one cargo if at the end we know it's not going to happen. So you have to give maybe short term what are going to be, for instance, our needs from the carrier side. I think that we are not to the carriers. And this also will help the transparency and with the collaboration with the carriers.
Okay, good. Thomas, you and myself belong to an association, so let me skip you and go into Andres point of view. Yeah. So, André, commitments from the carrier side.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is public, so I can't say we're not committed. We're very committed, and I think one of the examples I could take out of the box is that when we decided to promote the track and trace APIs, which is, I mean, it's not a revolution, but there is a standard there. What we did is we engaged with pilot customers, and we said, we'll give you a little more information than you would usually get. And I think that working together with customers to fine-tune the processes, to fine-tune the the information that we provide, I think gives them an incentive to go to the new standard rather than, as Eric was saying, use the old, EDI that we developed 25 years ago. So I think the way forward is to provide better information, perhaps more information. But again, to do that, then we also need, Javier and his super friends to provide better information. Looking stages, we were saying, and I think it's a journey we have to do together. We really have to work more closely together, and maybe look at our backyard, once in a while.
Okay, good. Now,
Jordi, can I ask a question?
Please, come on.
Yeah, so I'm just curious as to what everyone else thinks in terms of awareness of what DCSA is doing. And also, do people who would benefit from what DCSA is trying to do you think that do you think they have the time to understand what benefit they may derive out of this initiative? And André, to your point, being involved in kind of helping guide that initiative. And I ask that because I often obviously get asked for my thoughts on the DCSA, or oftentimes I'm describing it and I get asked what it is. So it's obviously, there is an awareness issue to overcome as well. So I'm curious about that.
Like I can let Thomas answer, but I mean, my answer would be visit dcsa.org if you don't know what it's all about. So that's my punchline. I think, it's a difficult question. It's a difficult question. I think we need to talk about it, but we also need to show the results. We need to be able to show results, and to do that, we need to work together with customers and possibly vendors. For example, you were talking about software vendors, and demonstrate that there is an evolution, and that there is an improvement of the end result. And if there isn't, then we haven't succeeded. But I think, Thomas, you probably have a better answer than me.
I don't know about that, André. You are the chairman, but I do have a point of view on it, certainly. And I think the testament that we are sitting here, and Jordi is there at the other end of that, is a testament to DCSA working with shippers. And I would also just like to I'll come back to the port, because that isn't part of all why we're here today. But we do work with shippers. We work with the European Shippers Councils. We work with a number of the largest retailers in the world, in the US. But it's of course work that we have to end this up. We are a relatively young organization, and that's not easy work. So trying to get in at the right level with the decision makers, but also with the innovators, the ones that are willing to try out new things, take risks, implement the new APIs for track and trace, and are willing to let go of the old stuff. That's critically important for us. And then on the ports, because they are tremendously important as well for us. And we engage with quite a large amount of the ports that are part of hosting this conference, both in the US, in Europe, and in Asia. And the terminal operators, it's the ecosystem. And to Andre's point about reaching out, that is the absolute most important message for us today is reach out. Let's see what we can do together, but you have to be willing to experiment and try out new things, because it is an old-fashioned industry. And if we want to change, we got to try out new stuff.
Yeah.
Javier, sorry.
No, I think that at the beginning will be, to be fair, a tough task, because as a shipper we need to see that something is happening and something is changing, and this is probably the most difficult part for you. That is something that we can see, and then once we see, I think that we can start collaborating really clear. I think that the European Shippers Council is collaborating, but as a customer, you need to share with as a customer that what you are doing and what has been changed, and then I think that we'll be on the same boat and collaborate with you on that. But at the beginning, will be have to explain what are going to be the benefits.
Okay, so now we're approaching the end of the session. I'm sorry, but there are many questions in the chat. We have selected one which goes to André. This is coming from Mr. Teixeira from Matos, and it refers to port digital transformation. How would you rate the change of the shipping industry?
How would I rate the change of the shipping industry related to ports or in general?
In general, I would say.
Well, in general, I can tell you, I spend a lot of time promoting digitalization, and I think that we demonstrated through the association and other collaborations that we don't have a choice. We, as Eric was saying before, Javier, the customer, we need to move forward. Our customers are getting more and more digital because their customers are requesting it. So it's like a chain reaction. And I think, there's no way we can avoid this. We probably need to go a bit faster. But again, I think as Thomas was saying, the standards are the foundations on which we can build new solutions, new efficiencies, and give an overall better service. It's not just the carriers, it's also all the other actors in the supply chain.
Yeah, thank you, André. So we're approaching the end of the session, so let me just make some wrap up of the whole things we have said. We would have liked to have more time, but let me wrap up now on where we are. So it's important that we innovate, that we are resilient against disruptions like the current pandemic situation and the COVID. And it's very important that the industry cooperates. That's extremely important to have a standard approach to standards. That's very important, and digitization. Shippers and carriers need to work together. We have to. Maybe we call about the common playing field. Maybe we have to go back to a playground, whatever it is. But we really need to cooperate. That's important. And this has to be extended to all stakeholders. We need to build and enlarge the standard mode of understanding. And we ask you, viewers, as well, to get involved. Are you a member of any association, any trade association, any business association? Come on, if not, subscribe. Be part of it, because the current discussions we are having in legislation, in standards, in everything, it's everything played at stakeholders' league. So we need you to become part of it. We need you to participate. So sign up at DCSA.org, or sign up at the European Shippers Council Maritime forums, or sign up at the European Shippers Council and the Global Shippers Alliance, or at the Spanish Shippers Council, wherever it is. But come in and be part of it. And also, the important point as well as to start interacting from your side is that you observe the language you have with your suppliers, with your customers, and try to standardize it to achieve your own goals. That's extremely important. With this, I'm sure that the whole effort will be going into the same flow. Thank you. So, that's all for today. Thank you, the panelists. Thank you, the speakers. Thank you, the viewers. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your attention. And if you missed any content today, you still can catch up at Smart Ports TV. Thank you. Stay safe. Thank you.